This is from the book of Exodus, chapter 25, verses 8 and 9. It says, "And let them make me a sanctuary, that I may dwell among them, according to all that I show you, that is, the pattern of the tabernacle and the pattern of all its furnishings, just so you shall make it." Exodus 25.
Thank you. Is that working now? Yeah. Okay, good. Good morning. Happy Sabbath to all of you. I thank you for the scripture read and all. So today I was going to talk a bit dwelling with God. So I'm talking about the tabernacle. For those who didn't know that, tabernacle actually means dwelling. So, essentially this is just a big meeting place that was put together so that God could dwell with us, which is the thing that he wants the most. He wants to spend time with us as his creations. It's kind of interesting to note that at that time, most all of the altars and churches, they were all kind of permanent fixtures. But this is coming about at the time when the Jews were wandering the desert, so they had to have a portable method of going from place to place. And they would stop, set up the tabernacle, and then God would be present there with them. And then when it was time to move on, the cloud that represented God, that showed that God was there, would lift up, and they would follow it to the next place. Which button is my forward button? All right. So I got this this verse out from I can't read it up there. Exodus 33:7. So I kind of wondered if I should put this in or not, because it kind of detracts from the whole of the tabernacle as I'm discussing. But I thought it was kind of important to note that there was more than one tabernacle. This is the tabernacle of meeting, which was essentially Moses' tent. He took it, pitched it outside of the main area of the camp, and then he would go out there and he would commune with God at that point. So then God needed this place for him to be able to go and meet with his people. So he requested that those who were willing, he only wanted willing offerings, but this is a list of the stuff that he wanted. And so he asked that people willingly give all of these things to him so that they could build the tabernacle. And you can see, as you kind of look down through the list, you got your gold, silver, brass. Brass is not too much of an expensive thing, but your fine linens, your ram skins, all of these things. A lot of these are really expensive, kind of valuable things at the time that he was asking. And this was a bunch of people, as I said, that were just wandering, so they didn't really have a whole lot for possessions at this point. But they gave, and they gave a lot. They gave so much that, in fact, God had to tell them, "Hey, stop giving, because we got everything we need." So, this kind of says something about how important they felt the tabernacle was as well. I also, as you look through the list, you can see some of the things have kind of a metaphorical purpose within the Bible. So your gold and your silver, those are things that kind of represent kind of royalty and like richness and things like that. But additionally, the gold, so when you get inside of the tabernacle proper, the actual tent that's inside of the tent, all the walls were lined with gold. All of the furniture was either gold plated or made of gold. So you had all this gold, and so it would have given off a really nice kind of a yellowish glow, I guess. But gold kind of, the other thing about it, it represents kind of purity and strength. Gold is what they call an inert mineral, so it does not react with much of anything. So it's pretty much just kind of always there. It's also one of the few metals that you can get out of the ground in its natural state. You don't have to take the ore and then try to process the ore to get the gold out of it. They do some of that, but it's not. It also can be found in veins of just gold. Silver, again, it's also kind of thought of as pure. I remember reading once upon a time that a lot of the kings and such, they would use like these silver goblets is what they would drink out of, because they believed that the purity of the silver would negate any poisons that might be in their beverages. I'm not going to go through this whole list, don't worry about that. But I did want to kind of quick cover also the three colors there, the blue, purple, and scarlet. So the blue is something that kind of represents heaven, it represents God's law. And so there was a lot of blue was used in some of the entrances and things of that nature. It was used in the veil that went between the holy and the Holy of Holies. Purple, again, that's kind of a kingly thing. It represents regality, things of that nature. And then scarlet, of course, would be there to represent the blood of God. There's a few other things. Shittim wood is acacia wood. It's just the plural form of the Hebrew word for it, I think. The badger's skin, depending on which version of the Bible you're reading, that can be a whole bunch of different things. It's just fine leather, essentially, but some say badger skin, some say dolphin skin, some say other things as well. Am I talking too fast? I feel like maybe I am. So now this is a kind of a map to show this is how the tabernacle was positioned once they got to having this actual kind of portable tabernacle within the main area of the camp. And I don't really have a whole lot to say about this other than just to kind of show. And then the bottom one's a pointer, is that right? Yeah, okay. I'm not sure if I can work a pointer. But you can see that each of the 12 tribes has their own kind of area that surrounds the tabernacle. And you can see that there were large numbers of people there as well. So earlier I was talking about kind of how you would know that God was present. And so you can see here, it's kind of a cross between these clouds and this fire. Well, essentially during the day, there would be a big plume cloud going up to the heavens, and that would represent that God was present. At night, it would be a big plume of fire, essentially, going up to the heavens. I'm trying to think of how I was going to go with that. So when it was time for them to move on, as I had said earlier, this plume would disappear, and it would then kind of reappear, and they would follow it to wherever the next place was, and they would follow it throughout the day, and then when it stopped, that would be the place where they were to set up the tabernacle again. I got a couple other instances as far as kind of God and being a pillar of fire, things of that nature. And so this plume that is on top of the tabernacle, it's the same one that we talked about earlier in Exodus that kind of led the Jews out of Egypt. So you can see at that point, it was a pillar of clouds during the day, it was a pillar of fire at night so that they could see where they were going. And then I think my thing, I cut it off a little bit. So the bottom is a quote from Revelation, and I looked and I behold, let me try that again. Then I looked and behold a white cloud, and on the cloud sat one like the Son of Man. So it's another instance where this cloud is kind of a representative of God. It's a representative of Jesus. So I got a floor plan here. And this is the tabernacle. And one of the interesting things, one of the things that and I don't know, kind of weird this way, I guess, but one of the reasons why I kind of got into this idea of the tabernacle and really enjoyed it is it's just, there's so much specificity to all of it, to how big it was supposed to be, what it was made out of. All of this is listed within the Bible, so you can get your different measurements. This amat is it's a cubit, so it's the same measurement, different name. But you can see you come in from the east. If I can get the pointer to work or not, but well, I guess I can't. So at any rate, the entrance to the tented area is on the east right there. And so, you know, the east kind of is another thing that has a tendency to represent various things. I know in some places it's more representative of, you know, invaders, destruction, things of that nature. But I got a couple of those bunched right on top of each other. Should have tried this out before, I guess. But there's a couple examples of the east representing something good. And then in Exodus, as they're coming up to the Red Sea, I'm sorry, no, the first one I have there is about the locusts. So in order to spread the plagues, God told Moses to raise his rod and hold it out over Egypt. And then the east wind came and it blew day and night. And then the next day, that same wind brought the locusts. That became the plague of locusts. And then the other time is this bottom one, where when they got to the Red Sea, God told him to hold his hand over the sea. And then the sea was parted, as we all know. It was parted by an east wind, though. So, and I guess I got one more that I picked up is, I don't know if you necessarily want to say good or bad, but it's another example of God and kind of his protectors. After Adam and Eve were driven out of the Garden of Eden, he set up cherubim at the entrance to Eden on the east. So, you know, on the one hand, that's kind of the downfall of humanity, right? But on the other hand, that I guess knowing that Eden is this kind of perfect place, this perfect garden on earth, and its entrance is also to the east. So I thought, well, you know, that might be kind of symbolic of something. So I'm not sure if that's really where oh yeah, okay. I got another kind of drawing of, so the first drawing wasn't totally accurate as far as positioning of stuff, but this drawing doesn't have as much information. So, but again, you can see, so the entrance is over here on the east, and when you walk in, the first thing that you're going to see is this altar of burnt offerings. So it's this big brass, it's going to look something like that. Big brass kind of a oven where they would take their sacrifices, both grain offerings and animal offerings, and sacrifice them there to God. And you know, I got the measurements there, so it's basically a 7.5 foot by 7.5 foot square that's 4.5 feet tall. So you know, you can imagine you come into this entrance, and the entire thing is surrounded by this big white linen curtain. And that's kind of supposed to represent the division of what's outside and what's inside. So what's God and what's not God, essentially. But you would come, you would give your offerings for the sacrifice to repent for your sins. And this is where they would send them to God, I guess. Again, it's another, I guess, the fact that it's a brazier, it's a burnt offering, there's going to be smoke coming off of that as well. So at this point now we've got two clouds of smoke, essentially, that are going up to heaven, that are kind of representing God and talking to God, I guess. But as they would do their offerings, of course, these are blood offerings, and so they would get they'd get blood on their hands, things of that nature. They would get kind of impurities on them from these animals that they would need to wash off. And so the next thing they had was this laver of water. And so they would go to this before they would enter the tabernacle proper. They would go to this laver, they would wash their hands, their feet, etc. I found it interesting that it was made from mirrors of women that served within the tabernacle area. Mirrors were kind of not everybody had them. So mirrors back then were polished brass, polished copper, polished metal. They didn't have, the glass mirrors like we have today. So there was a lot of craftsmanship and a lot of metal involved in making a mirror. So it was something that they, not everybody had. And if you had one, you kind of wanted to hold on to it. But there were enough women that donated their mirrors to the tabernacle that they were able to make up this laver. It's one of the few things within the Bible that it really doesn't give us a lot of specificity on. It doesn't tell us how big it is. It doesn't tell us what shape it is. It doesn't really tell us much, except for that there is a bowl of water, essentially, that they can wash themselves in, and that the water was to be replaced every day. So, you can kind of guess that it probably wasn't huge, though, because, again, it's made of melted down mirrors, and you take a whole lot of mirrors to get it too big. But as I was saying before, it's kind of both practical and also spiritual cleaning before you would enter the holy place. So in addition to kind of the cleaning, the purification of the priests before they would go into this place that only the priests were allowed, there would also be, you don't want to go in there with bloody hands and get blood all over all of your stuff that you use to pray to God and to worship your God. So the next thing that you come across is going to be it's a big curtain, and I've got pictures of it that I think I put them in the wrong order probably. I can go forward a couple here. Maybe. Nope. There you go. So this is kind of nope, that was the wrong one. I'm sorry. Maybe I didn't get the other picture. We'll get back to this one later, I guess. But there was again, another colorful curtain that was, kind of blue, purple, scarlet curtain that would have been essentially the east side front of the tabernacle. And again, the front side is where you would enter the tabernacle. And when you went in there would be basically three things that you would see. One of them would be this table of showbread. The showbread, that would be on your right-hand side, so that would be on the north side of the tabernacle. It was a acacia wood table that was then plated in gold, and on it there was 12 loaves of unleavened bread and a glass and I think a jug of wine. And all of this was kind of to represent Christ. Sorry. So he, there we go, yeah. On the north side as he entered, he had 12 loaves of bread. One of them represented each of the 12 tribes. Makes sense. And this bread wasn't to be eaten. It was there. They left it for a week, and then they would replace it at the end of each week with new bread. And then, like I was just saying, it represents Christ, who said of himself that he is the bread of life. And there's some other passages as well where he discusses bread and how it kind of represents God and his word. One of the other things that you would see, which would be on your, I think I said left hand before, but I meant right hand, I apologize. On your left hand, or the south side of the tabernacle, would be this lampstand. It's one of the few things in there that isn't just gold plated. It was actually solid gold, and it had to be hammered out by a craftsman who had the ability to work with gold well. And then, again, there's descriptions of the cups, how they were supposed to be positioned, and the shape of them, and all of that. And also that it was to be used with, you were supposed to use like extra virgin, I guess, olive oil to put in the lamps. That was supposed to be not, wouldn't smoke, essentially. Within the tabernacle, this would be the only source of light. Again, there was the curtain behind that would keep it, and then it was all inside of a large kind of wooden structure that was wood encased in gold, held together by more wood, and had some silver sockets that the board sat in. And so it wouldn't be real bright in there, but it would have this kind of interesting, nice glow. And as I was saying before, because of the walls and everything in there being gold, or at least plated with gold, it would have had kind of a nice, kind of a warm glow. You would have kind of felt warm and happy and felt the presence of God as you were in there. Though, as I already said, we wouldn't be in there. We're not high priests. So the lampstand is also supposed to be representative of God. I've got there, you can't, I guess, see the whole quote. Essentially, so I am the light of the world. He who follows me shall not walk in darkness, but have the light of light. This is John 8:12. So, I guess the point I'm trying to get across with all of this is that everything kind of has a represents something else. And essentially all of those things are God, His Word, and His desire to dwell and commune with man. So as I said, there was three things in the holy area, in the front, the first area of the tabernacle. The third one is going to be this altar of incense. It was, again, a wooden box. I think it was probably about a 2 foot by 2 foot by 3 foot or something, if I remember. And again, it was gilded. It was plated in gold. I guess another thing that I hadn't really mentioned yet, but you can see on this picture really well, is these poles there. So most everything had rings built into it as well, that these gold-plated poles could be put in, because as I had said initially, this is in fact a portable church, essentially. So they had to have ways to carry these things, and you start looking at all the gold that's on there, and that's going to be pretty heavy. This is the altar of incense. I found it interesting, again, that in Exodus 30:34, you can't really read that on the screen, but there's actually a recipe that tells you precisely what is to go into the incense that get burnt on this altar. And then also, I guess this would be kind of again, it's another source of smoke that is rising up, that is to represent, that's how your prayers going up to God. That's how the prayers would get up there for people who are seeking salvation. And then this is where we get to, whoops, I pushed the wrong button. This is where we get to that curtain that I showed earlier. So this is the curtain, they call it the veil, and it goes in between the holy place, which is where the high priests would do all of their praying, and when they made the sacrifices, they would take the blood offering, some of it would go, and they would sprinkle it on this veil to kind of transfer the sins to it, and then they would light the incense that was in front of it, and they would pray to God, and hopefully the prayers then would rise up to Him, and these sins could be forgiven. It was, as you can see, had the same kind of color scheme. It was very fancily made. It was woven. It had cherubim on it that were embroidered in. So this was not an easy, cheap make. It took some time. And the no living thing was allowed beyond that point, because beyond that point we get into the Holy of Holies, and that's where God dwells. And as we know, you can't be in the presence of God, or else you will die. And then, the blood cast upon it, which I had already talked about a bit. And then once a year, they would, when they did had the goat and the scapegoat, they would also clean the veil to try to clean the old sins off of it as well. And then we get into the Holy of Holies, and that has the Ark of the Covenant, which I think we've talked about a few times, so probably some of this is well known. It was also made of acacia wood. It was gold plated, but the cherubim on top were actually fashioned out of hammered gold. They were solid gold. Another interesting thing to note is that the poles on this were not to be removed. Once they were put in, they were supposed to stay there. I'm not sure exactly what the meaning of that is or how that plays out. I think maybe it has something to do with the importance of it, though, and it always being prepared or ready to be moved should it need be. So, of course, one of the questions that I had asked, or I had talked to, and I actually talked to Dale about this, if no living thing can go into this area, how do they move it? I mean, it doesn't, it's not moving itself. They actually go in and they take it, pick it up, and they carry it. So I was kind of discussing that with Dale, and I guess his thought was, and it seems to make sense, as I was saying kind of in the beginning, is there's this cloud of smoke that represents God's presence, so people know that God is in the tabernacle. And when it's time to go, that cloud would leave, and then it would take them to the next place. So essentially, when that cloud was gone, God would no longer be in that Holy of Holies. He would not be in that place. So then at that point, a person would be able to enter it without dying. I guess the one other thing I got on the ark, on top of in between the cherubim, doesn't really show it in this picture, but it was the throne essentially of God. Oh, I forgot to mention what was in there. Probably all of you know this, but essentially the ark contains a copy of the Ten Commandments, the original stones that Moses put the Ten Commandments on, God put on the Ten Commandments on and gave to Moses. There's a jar of manna, and then Aaron's rod. Those are kind of the three things that are within it. And each of those has their own significance. Essentially, you got the law of God, you got the mercy of God, you got the I guess the power of God, maybe. But there's kind of again, it's one of those metaphorical things, so we might have to discuss or talk about the meaning of those things later. But then, here, as I was just saying, so between the cherubim is the mercy seat. This was where God would sit when he was there. And that kind of brings us around to another thing. The tabernacle in itself is supposed to be like an earthly recreation of God's temple in heaven. So when we get to heaven and we go into his throne room for our judgment, we will see essentially the same things. So at that point, we'll know exactly what the tabernacle looked like back in the day. Well, not exactly, but what it should have looked like. God would be sitting on his throne, and we know that there's cherubim kind of on either side of God that are there protecting him or watching over him. And at the foot of his throne is the Ten Commandments that he has given to us. So I think it's interesting that it's called the mercy seat, because of course that is what we're looking for from God, right? We want to have the mercy of God, and I don't know. I guess that's pretty much all I have for today. So I guess if you we can say a quick prayer. And dear God, thank you for bringing us together on this Sabbath. I appreciate the opportunity that you gave me to kind of share your word with people. Hopefully it wasn't too boring for them. I know it was mostly just kind of listing off a lot of stuff. Hopefully you can help me to improve my presentation skills, and we can get this better next time around. I'd ask that you keep a watching eye over everybody as we leave here today. And in your name we pray, amen.